buy a business and then I'm in charge and I control sort of my own destiny and I can hire and I can, sort of make a positive aspect in the business, like that's insanely desirable and that's not going away.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Peter Lehrman from Masters in Small Business M&A. I am recording on Blizzard Day here in New York with a fellow New Yorker, James Bohannon. We're going to jump right into a really interesting topic, an emerging topic and category in lower middle market acquisitions and investing, which has at least preliminarily been referred to as the F2E. It's not ETA, it's not SBA, it's not independent sponsor. It's called F2E, Finance to Entrepreneurship. And it refers to a professional who is typically mid-career, 10 to 20 plus years as an investment professional, investment banking professional, who leaves the comforts of a great fund or a great investment bank to go and either buy one business and then potentially serially buy others, or some combination of that. But it's not a search fund and it's not an independent sponsor doing deals on a one-off basis, although that's probably its most it's probably well-linked first cousin. And to do that, I have been able to track down somebody who spent a tremendous amount of time in and around this category. And I'm really lucky to have him here on the podcast today, which is James Bohannon from Belzberg, family office here in New York. James, thank you for putting this on my radar and then creating the opportunity for us to talk about it. I'm really excited for the chat.
Likewise. Thank you, Peter.
Before we dive into the F2E category and what you think is potentially emerging here as a new path for investment professionals, potentially a new mini category in lower middle market, private equity investing. Tell us about Belzberg and then tell us a little bit about you. And then I want to go and talk about your first exposure to this idea of F2E. So Belzberg first, and then we'll keep going.
Yeah, so Belzberg is a family office based in New York. Started as a single family with a couple families connected through marriage, and then sort of became a investment platform, merchant bank, basically because we built out a couple of fund businesses and added a couple more families. But we really look and feel like the family office of three connected families through marriage. I've been there coming up on 4 years, have a close, great relationship with the family. It's really fun. And have really been kind of steeped in the independent sponsor, lower middle market, ETA, sort of you name it, search world, because I run sourcing and origination for a private markets business. And so I get to talk to everybody and meet a lot of cool budding entrepreneurs that are in this really exciting inflection point of their career that we'll sort of dig into. A little more about me. I went to Trinity College in Hartford. I grew up in New York City, pretty entrepreneurial guy. Started a shoe business in high school called Del Toro. And, just always had the entrepreneurial bug, but I also had like a strong affinity for finance, financial services, and things like that. And where the stars sort of aligned for me was that there was this very entrepreneurial side of financial services. So you think of finance, I graduated 2010. So we were kind of on the later edge of that whole kind of Tiger Cub, go out and start a hedge fund thing. And we were getting more from publics into kind of private markets. And the jobs to be had then were go work in an investment bank or go work at a private equity fund. Those were sort of the two things on all of our radar in 2010. We did have that tiny little thing called a massive financial crisis around that time too. So that made it super fun. So we took what we could get. But it was interesting to learn about because we saw these young guys go and start these like hedge funds. And it's sort of you saw 24, 26-year-old guys starting hedge funds. And then it kind of took a little while for that to trickle down to the private markets. And I remember being kind of a few years out of school, I had a good friend and fraternity brother that I got to work with for a little bit who was at a big bank. And he was like, there's no one putting capital in the inland marine leasing barge business down in the bayou. And I think if I can go out and raise some money, that I could buy some of these barges, and obviously they offer unbelievable yields and triple net leases, and it's non-cyclical, and there's no capital into it, and there's all these sort of attributes, depreciation attributes, and you name it. And I think I could build a business on that. And that to me was crazy. So it was like, whoa, you can just like leave your banking job that we're all trying to get and actually just go buy kind of a business or invest in sort of niche off the run business. It just like almost was a different time. Like things changed so much, even though that was 2014, 2015, it just wasn't as sort of well known. And then, not to drop like the name that always gets dropped in this space so much, but then you hear out these other stories of like the guys that are going to buy Burger King. Like, and MBAs at Harvard, they want to go buy a couple of Burger Kings. Like that was still this like aha moment that a lot of people were having back then. It was kind of fewer and farther in between. But the whole idea is like, if I can find the capital, I think I could buy this business. I think I could run it maybe a little better than this person. And I think that I could sell it. And that moment started this massive wave, fast forwarding to kind of where we are today, where it's a very normal occurrence for people to be sitting in a large cap private equity seat, making XYZ partner track with a carry pool to be like, all right, I'm out. I'm going to go buy like a random, residential services roofing business. And I'm moving me and my young baby to like Wichita to do it. Like that would be bananas, like even 15 years ago. And now it's like pretty normal.
Why is it happening now? What do you have a sense for what's changed? Do you have a good explanation for why? I agree with you. It's definitely happening now. That's a fact. You can see it happening. You can hear it happening. There are more and more examples of it, but any sense as to why this is happening now and why these opportunities are becoming interesting to that kind of professional?
I think you can almost attribute it to a bunch of different factors. Like if you look at our parents' generation, it was like, go get a job and go get a steady job and get a paycheck. And, maybe you get carried interest, or you get partnership, or you get equity, and maybe you sort of be the CEO. And our generation obviously is way more entrepreneurial. And it was, we saw the whole go start a business in college, go, get venture funding, go build Facebook, all that became much more normal. But then I think that like the natural like evolution of that was like, well, I'm not a tech entrepreneur. I don't have some new great idea. Like I want to apply my skills of investing and analyzing businesses and building businesses, but I still want ownership. And I think it's a generational thing that we understood that you need to own in this world. You can't be an employee because then you're just renting time. And then the more you study like the actual great investors, I mean, Munger and Warren Buffett and all these people, all these life lessons, like you actually have to own something to have control. You need equity, right? Like if you just have a job in today's world, you kind of are just like waiting for someone else to give you a discretionary bonus. You can get fired, you can get displaced, you can get moved, you can get laid off. Like something can happen and you're not in control of your own destiny. So I think our generation like wants to own, right? And then I think when it kind of came out that like, wait a minute, all I have to do is raise some money to go buy a business, and then I'm in charge and I control sort of my own destiny, and I can hire and I can, sort of make a positive aspect in the business. Like that's insanely desirable. And that's not going away. And I think like now you obviously, like, not to get too heady on it, but now we introduce the whole technological revolution where we can all get a website going and AI and all these things, and everyone's going to be able to build their own businesses. Like the desire to own your own stuff. And that's from Munger all the way to like, Naval Ravikant, like you must own. Like, I don't think that desire is going away.
There's no question that has become, it feels like that's a reasonable explanation for the acceleration and the expansion of ETA, self-funded search acquisitions, big expansion in funded search as a category coming out of business schools and elsewhere.
I also think, I mean, not to interrupt, but I ask you, like, are there just less jobs that paid the huge amounts that they used to? Like, it felt like there were so many seats, and now it's just so much more competitive maybe in the banks. or private equity or something like that. It's like now to really make a mark and do something fulfilling, swing for the fences, like there's a huge desire now to own versus just climb a corporate ladder.
I think what I think is what feels more new to me is not ETA, not independent sponsors in general as a category, but what feels interesting is this class of people who have a super high opportunity cost on their next best alternative. Like you said, their partner track at a great firm or a great investment fund that are, increasingly leaving those paths to do something like that. That's the category that I wanted to dive in on and discuss today with you. I think there's a huge number of podcasts and a large amount of literature that already exists on ETA and self-funded search and funded search. And there's a reasonable amount of literature and a meaningful amount of momentum, generally speaking, around independent sponsors. But there's this persona, there's this archetype that is, coming out of a mid-career, like a mid-career path at with a lot of pedigree at a public investment firm or a major investment bank or a really significant private equity firm that are leaving to go and buy lower middle market businesses. This category, which I mentioned as being F2E, which I'll let you explain the reference to F2E in the normal course of the conversation. Do you view this as an archetype that sits inside the overall independent sponsor category, or do you view this as something different from that?
I do view it as a certain type of independent sponsor, and it's maybe like on the farther end of the spectrum of whether it's like search ETA type, MBA person. This is now more of experience. This is a mid-career professional, so it's a in my mind a higher caliber, different risk spectrum, more experienced version of an independent sponsor.
What is the other category of independent sponsor that this is distinct from? Like, who else fits in the independent sponsor bucket that doesn't fit into this bucket?
Well, I think there's a handful. So if I think of just financial professionals, there's going to be people that maybe are 4 to 6 years of experience, right? That are like, maybe they were in part of an MBA program. Maybe they did a couple years of banking, but very early on in their career, they're like, I want to go buy a business and be either a searcher or an independent sponsor and get out there. Then there are those who are like, okay, I actually have spent 7, 10, 12 years at multiple different firms. I've sat on boards, I've invested, I've sat in ICs, I've been a banker. Like they've kind of been around the block 4 or 5 times. Like that type of person is kind of a different animal, and they're just less green, right? They've got more mileage. They've gotten beaten up a little bit more by life. They're probably like still scrappy and hungry, and they're still like searching for something. Maybe they're 37, 38 years old, and they're like, all right, what do I really have? Like maybe I made some money, maybe I have some carry over here. Like I haven't really like gotten to put my stamp on something. I've been fired, over here. I've had partner fights here. I've had some success here. I had a couple exits here, but they've yet to kind of really like fully prove themselves and take that shot. And that part of their career is crucial because it's usually people are like, maybe they're married, they've made some money, so they have some money to invest. They, many cases will have a child, right? So like, it's a good time. Like if you have a child, like you got more to lose. You know what I mean? And as an investor, you like investing with someone like that. They're like, they have 15 years of their career equity that they're putting on the line. They're putting $700,000 of their savings or $1.5 million or $3 million, whatever it is that means something to them. They're putting that on the line. And they're saying this first business has to work out because I have all that to lose. If you're 22 years old and you buy, you start a startup and you invest $10,000, you have nothing to lose. That blows up, doesn't matter. If you're 37 and you take all your career contacts to invest in this new company you're going to buy and you screw that up, like there's risk there. And that's skin in the game. And that's probably a good place to invest. And that person, that operator is going to have a lot more chops. So like that's a pretty attractive partner to invest with. And a lot of people will share this, right? This is not like a new idea that I have or you have, but I think like the articulation of financier to entrepreneur, and I must credit it for Andy Freeman of Brickett Point, beautifully articulated that acronym, which I was like, there it is. Like, that's exactly what it is. Cause I'd always been dealing with these guys, but you're really aligning yourself someone in this like crucial point of their career. And it's almost akin to like someone's first album, right? Like they've been writing music for 10 years of their childhood and they're going to put out their first album. Like it's their best work. Like it's got to be like the best. And you've got someone like this cool inflection point of their career where they're willing to put it all on the line and invest their own personal money. They've got the kid and the apartment and they've been comfortable. Like that's where you want to be, like as the investor, I think.
Why are so many of the professionals who kind of fit into this box, why are they buying one business as opposed to raising a small fund?
That is just, I think, a evolution slightly of where we are in the capital formation cycle. And I think the desire of the capital bases just to get away from blind pool funds and to be more a part of the sausage making process, i.e. the underwriting process. Family offices would rather see a deal. And take this F2E version that we just talked about, who's mid-career, has got the 3-year-old and the lab and the mortgage, and they're putting in $700,000. Like, I want to look at the business. Like, I don't want to hear, oh, I'm going to invest in the lower middle market and I've got a good network. It's like, no, let's actually look at something together. Like give me bird in hand. Like, I want to give me something tangible. Like what are we actually talking about here? Like, that's why everyone loves to look at a deal with an independent sponsor, not just a fund. Funds for me, like the story has to be so good. You know what I mean? Like this guy was running strategic partners at Blackstone and he was managing $6 billion and he's spinning out and he's getting 2 billion from this pension fund. And like, then it makes sense when it's like just so high profile, or like on the venture, you see that, or Bobby Jane spins out a Citadel or Millennium or whatever, like then it sort of makes sense. But I say to a lot of people, like, don't start the fund unless it makes total sense. Like if that's struck, like for some assets, you need the fund, right? And, or if it's just like such a natural evolution of doing deals that, okay, like these investors are all coming with you anyway, like you might as well start the fund. But I think that's just like, I think appetites have changed.
Let's talk a little bit about the structure of what you're seeing in this category, this F2E category. It sounds like potentially one of the places where it might be different from independent sponsors is for a different approach to capital formation than independent sponsors is, while it is one deal, it seems like at least some of these professionals that sort of fit into this archetype are raising a small slug of capital prior to even finding the deal itself. Like they don't always have a deal under LOI. Whereas I think a lot of independent sponsors, they're out in the market. Maybe they've bought a couple of businesses already. They're out in the market again. They find a new business. They go under LOI and they reach out to a set of pre-existing as well as potentially new capital partners. It seems like the F2E category has professionals who say, I'm going to go buy one business. And that's how I'm going to start building my holding company, or how I'm going to start this sort of entrepreneurial chapter after finance, but I'm going to raise 15 million or 20 or $30 million to go and do that. Am I just on the receiving end of one or two of those pitches, or does that tend to be more the way that these guys are looking to operate?
I think I would probably say that is the minority of scenarios. I think if people I definitely see some cases where people are like, look, I want to build a real business. I'm going to do this for the next 30 years. I want to invest a little bit upfront in the management company, right? So I do want to hire a little bit. I do want some cash for, let's just say sourcing mechanisms and maybe an office and all that. And if that's someone that's 15, 20 years in, they might have the quality of relationships so they can go to people and do some sort of like management company level deal or GP stake deal just to get some working capital in the business. And that also gets like the credibility of whatever family is sort of backing it. So like, I do see that, but at the end of the day, it really just comes down to the first deal? Like, what are we actually talking about here? So you can get those deals, but it's almost just like, it's less interesting unless you really like, as the investor, if you've been tracking someone's whole career and they're friends, you know them, like you've done deals together, all that, and you see them spin out and you really want to be part of the journey even pre-deal one, like that is a good way to like get that involved. So it all kind of depends on what the sponsor wants.
How are they navigating the off ramp from their current career to then tracking down the first deal that they sit down and talk to with someone like you at Belzberg? Like, do they quit and then leave? You see so much of this. Like, what are they doing?
It's so funny. I had two young guys reach out to me from their work email last week, send me a presentation, come into the office, and they're like, "Yeah, we're gonna leave as soon as we get our bonuses." I was like, "That's it's like almost like so out in the open, so flagrant, so blatant." I sort of loved it. I think it sort of depends. There's sometimes a burn the boat mentality. Like some people are like, "Look, I need to just quit now. And once I quit, I know there's no going back and I'm going to focus 100% on getting a deal. And like, I don't have a paycheck, so I got to like get into it and just get after it." Other people are like, I'm going to start planting the seeds for 2 years while I leave. And like, I'm going to do stuff on the side and sort of send emails out of my personal. Like, it kind of depends on personal circumstances, right? But you see all the above. You see people sending side text messages and like saying, "Meet me in this corner of a Starbucks, like way downtown, and I'm terrified to see anyone," and like wearing the mustache and the hat and the secret thing. And I'm like, I'm not gonna tell you. Like this is, and like that's always kind of fun. It's a little cloak and dagger. On the other side, I see like super high profile people leaving Blackstone, and then it's like, you can't say anything, and like heaven forbid, because all of Wall Street is gonna ripple with excitement when they find out this person's leaving. Some people are more transparent with their existing employers, and they're like, "Look, I know little Bobby's going to leave. He's wanted to go buy a business for ages. We're super supportive of it. He can use the conference room in the meantime." We see all the above, but earlier is better. Like I do like, it is fun to see earlier. I think when, just like it's easier to find a job when you have a job, it's almost probably easier to like get people excited about what you're doing right before you've left. So it's probably not a terrible idea to like plant a couple of seeds and some conversations, and especially if you have a mentorship network. And then it's probably like good to find that fine line of like, all right, now I'm going to actually quit, go full time, fully commit to this, do everything on the up and up with your previous employer, right? Like that's key because they're getting a phone call, right? And they're going to want to know how you were towards the end. And if you handle yourself well, you're upfront, realize you're getting paid, like there's a little search going on at the same time. Like that's usually like no one's faulted too much for that. But there's a fine line of how you handle things, but it's delicate to your point. And it's a good question.
They're typically not actually that far along on a specific deal at this point, right? It's really just preliminary conversations with capital sources like you and others that they're sort of talking to, but they're not actively working for Blackstone and sourcing some like lower middle market deal, in one way or that's a lot, because that's a lot of plates to spin all at the same time.
I would actually say now look, like some of the bigger firms like a Blackstone or something, there's crazy non-competes and garden leaves and all that, but just take those aside, take your standard job. I think it's very common for people to be searching on the side, get an LOI, get the pen out ready, tell their employer sign the LOI, and then out. Right. And like their bag is packed and like secretly like redbushcapital.com has been registered and they've got their, they've got their
Wow.
thing, like very common.
That's good color.
Yeah. Redbush Capital is the name of my,
I'd be curious to talk a little bit maybe about if you were to just, again, stay focused on this archetype of really, really promising professionals with a lot of upside. If they just continue on the partner track where they are, they're not someone who, got started in their mid-20s. They're someone who's sort of taking this leap in the, somewhere, but I don't know, maybe between like 35 and 55, maybe call it. Do you source these professionals actively? Do they come to you? Like, do you have a do you have like an outbound motion to try and persuade people that are in this chapter of their life to think about this opportunity? I'm curious, sort of like how the conversations occur, who tends to approach who, and then I want to get into like what you think are who are going to be great capital partners to this type of professional. Like, what do they need from their capital partners? So maybe two-part question, but yeah, I'm curious how sourcing works for this part of the market. You mentioned Andy Freeman at Bricket Point. He obviously is investing in this category. Like, obviously not asking you to speak for him, but how do you and him and other guys like that, how do you guys think about trying to go hunt down these high potential people and think about being their, one of their first phone calls?
I think you've got to like just meet a ton of people and be encouraging and be a sounding board and be supportive of what they're trying to do. I mean, for me, I'm very pro go for it, right? And I'm very pro like you can do it and like chase your dreams and all that stuff. I'm not like the voice of like you know conservative dad like stay with your job like you'll never succeed type of thing. So I'm always telling people like yeah, look, this guy did it and this buddy of mine did it. And I have just so many friends that are my age, younger or older that have, like success stories in the space of doing it on various levels, just buying a small business and, doing well over here or building an empire over here. So it's totally like possible. And I'm always like trying to meet and talk to more and more of my friends. Anyone that knows me will be like, yeah, like I don't shut up about this stuff. Like I love sort of, I get excited about this. And so the kind of the more I get people talking and whenever I'm talking to someone that works at a fund, I'm like, so the do you love this place? Like, do you want to run this place? Like, I can't help myself. Are you want to be the CEO? And they're like, nah, not really. I'm like, well, what do you want to do? And they're like, well, honestly, what I want to do, like, yes, like that's when I get engaged. They're like, I want to dance. I'm like, go, like, good, let's, like, I'm always needling people for that personally. And then, like, on top of that, it's a lot of like power networking and it's going to the conferences. And the coolest thing you can do, and I'm lucky in my seat, if you just go to like 30 different other family office investors and you say, who do you like the most? Who are your three? You then have a 90-person curated CRM of highly talented people. And that's a great way to do it. And whenever I'm talking to other families, I'm saying, look, what independent sponsors do you like? And who's been a great partner to you, right? Like I love talking to that stuff. So I think it's being vocal, it's being supportive, it's actively looking for people that are on this kind of hero's journey. It's being enthusiastic and getting out there and doing stuff like this. And, I've always like my whole kind of career, I've been excited about, entrepreneurship. So I just feel like I've been lucky enough to get people that sort of come to me and I get to help them. Maybe they help me, all that. So I've seen a lot of people build their businesses. The funny thing about where we are kind of in the cycle of when all these businesses started is I think there's this thing in private equity. Like a lot of these firms were started in like the 60s and 70s and 80s. And those people are now like 70. And the next gen is like kind of in their like late 50s and 60s. And my gen is in like their mid 30s and into their 40s. And like a lot of times that middle group hasn't left yet. So they're holding on to carry and they've got like another 15 years in them. So if you're like 36, you're like my 56-year-old boss is not leaving for 15 years. So it's like, wait a minute, like, okay, like, what do I do? And then like there's 4 versions of that dude. And so, like, what am I doing here? Right. Like, I'm doing all the work. This guy is sitting down in Palm Beach. Like, I'm the one, like, on these boards. Like, if I just knew a bunch of family offices, I could do this myself. Like, the only reason I'm here is because they have the capital in house. And as capital went less captive to funds and it became more of a direct market, there's just more and more appetite for those people to go direct and build their relationships with family offices and take a swing. The second part of your question, I forget, but please.
I was going to ask you, just based upon what you just said, you were saying like he's down in Palm Beach and I'm doing all the work. Like, is that true? Or is there a little more to it than that? Do you feel like that's true a lot of the time? Are they really doing all the work? What do people who leave and head in this direction, what do they not appreciate about how hard it is, or what do they forget to appreciate before they go out on their own? Like, are they truly already doing all aspects of the job, or is there something that they need to appreciate before they collect their bonus, turn in their letter of resignation, and go sign up a business under LOI and call James?
It's a great question. And I think part of the investigative process that we have as an investor is we want to look at someone's track record and say, how much is that person's attribution versus the firm? Like, if you're like, I was not to pick on Blackstone, I'll pick on Apollo. I was at Apollo for all these years. Look at all these exits we did. It's like, all right, well, was that you? Or like, was that like the unbelievable franchise that is Apollo? And trying to sort of figure that out. And we'll just stick with the big cap PE example for now. And then that person leaves Apollo and they're like, all right, wait a minute. Like, it's just me now. I don't have the fancy business card. People aren't picking up the phone. Like, I'm just a dude in the garage that doesn't know anybody that now has to like dial for dollars. Because that's kind of what you're doing in the beginning. And there is a huge learning curve there, I think. And I think people don't quite understand that, like, you're in the business of investing, like you're building a business from scratch. And like sales is a huge part of that. And like capital formation, i.e. fundraising, no one wants to say it, like you're a fundraiser. If you are a fundraiser who needs to tell a great story and you need to buy a business and operate, that's your product. But like a lot of times people will come out and just don't realize how difficult it is once they're out of that big ecosystem to just drum up 50, 75, $150 million. Like the people that don't have an interesting, strong thesis, and they're like, oh, we want to do a fund one, it's $175 million. Like we both came from these okay firms. Like, there's like a harsh reality there of like, okay, that's actually very hard. And I think when people sort of make that switch, they don't fully appreciate kind of what it's going to be like.
Maybe just to get a little more specific on the lower middle market, because that's where I certainly spend all of my time, and that's all that I think about. And I think for the most part, same for you, right, James? I mean, so what's your view on like someone leaving Apollo, Blackstone, KKR, Carlyle, and then going into the lower middle market versus someone who, leaves, I don't know, Shore Group, Alpine, one of these very, very well-run lower middle market private equity funds? Do you think is there a difference in how you evaluate those people? Obviously, one came from Apollo. Apollo's the best in the world at what Apollo does. Incredibly high bar for talent, but they've probably been buying businesses from Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs. They've never spoken to a business broker before in their life. Like all of the information on the businesses was really, really well compiled and well organized by a banker and a sell side process.
It's all just nice and neat, tied up in a bow for them.
I'm not saying it's easy to be an investment professional at Apollo. I'm sure there's a lot of things to do really, really well there. But what is your view when you're evaluating someone as an investment partner, as an LP to them, and they're coming from a place like that versus someone who's been maybe less pedigreed or a less well-known firm, but that has more lower middle market chops and experience? Do you think about that a lot? Does that matter to you? Or
Oh yeah, big time. I think, look, like there's pros and cons. Like the guy that's the man or woman that's coming out of a nice lower middle market, scrappy firm where all the partners are doing everything and they're very operationally intensive, and they are on the ground floor and they got the dirt in their fingernails and they are really involved in the business. Like you need that, right? And there's like that's very important and very crucial. Maybe that Apollo partner like has been so far removed from that like when they're doing the deal, you want to make sure they have a good management team, right? And there's a really good operator involved. Maybe you're less worried about that if it's a real buy and build lower middle market person that's been on the ground, right? So there's pros and cons. That said, let's say that Apollo person is very polished, right? They have, like you said, huge bar for talent. They've been trained really well. They're institutional quality. They really know what they're doing. They can grind very hard. They tell an amazing story. Like they're going to build a big business, and you're like, all right, like this person's no joke. Like I can trust that the franchise is going to be done well, but I want to make sure they have like an operator that's really like on the ground. So pros and cons, right? So maybe that really operational, intense, scrappy car wash dude that's building the business over here, you're kind of like, he's great, but like I wish he was a little more polished. Like maybe he should partner with the Apollo guy. And they're going to build a great business. That more, I think, is probably relevant if you're talking about them raising a fund, because you have more like risk of if they don't raise money on this deal, then things are going to fall apart, right? Whereas like if you're just looking at a standalone business, you care less about the polish. You do care maybe about like, all right, this is a high integrity person that's behaved well in a large institution and all that, but
how would you characterize what they're looking for in the capital partners that they talk to? Like, what are they looking for from someone like you? What are they looking for from other family offices? Are they looking for one big check writer that speaks to 75, 80% of the capital that they need? Is it more like a search fund where they're going to sell units and maybe it's going to be more broadly distributed cap table of LPs? Like, what are you seeing there in terms of what they're looking for from the LP, the core LPs that are going to capitalize the first deal?
I think they ideally want sort of 5 big partners, right? So they want like just like customer concentration or supplier concentration. You don't want someone that's more than 20 to 25%. But right off the bat, you do want someone that's 20 to 25%, right? Because you want an anchor, someone that's going to vouch for you, just like you're, coming into a new, like, whatever, like group or like I'm the gang, or you someone's going to be like, I vouch for this person, especially if it's a well-known family office that has a really good program, right? That's done a lot of deals in this space. Like if you get XYZ name, and we know these, like we'll just say Pritzker, that's a really famous. If the Pritzker family is backing you, that's going to give you a lot of credibility in the Chicago family office world, right? And that's going to probably lead to a lot of other families who are like, oh, well, Pritzker's doing it, like the best go to them. It's the same like phenomenon in obviously venture and Sequoia A16Z, etc.
Let me ask about that. Is it the same? Do you think it's the same? And where like there are these firms, whether they're family offices or otherwise, that like really do tend to see the very best sort of like F2Es when they're making their leap?
I just think like when you're early days and you haven't proven yourself as an F2E, like having the brand name of a family that every other investor knows is going to add a huge amount of credibility, and it's just going to make people comfortable. And they're going to be like, all right, like it's like, we're not talking about it's the same thing with institutions, right? It's like if Texas Teachers is investing in this startup fund, like I just feel a little more comfortable about it than like my neighbor Bob, whose nephew is doing this and it's some crypto thing, right? I'm like, all right, this has been vetted. And I think in the family world, there's there's 10, 20 of these names that just have really highly regarded programs.
Do you feel like those programs are highly regarded for the right reasons? Have they distinguished themselves as being exceptional at sourcing and selecting great emerging managers, F2Es, emerging managers, or are they just billionaires with significant family names?
Great question.
And I know I'm putting you on the spot. It's a pretty provocative question, but
No, I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
I think it's almost like the verdict is out, right? Like the data is not yet in. I think a lot of it is they're just famous names. But when you really get in the weeds, like you could say, all right, Walton or whatever, like that sounds great. Sure, the Walton family backed me. But then when you really learn about the program and you're like, well, they don't pick managers that well. I'm not saying them, but I'm saying, a group like, okay, maybe they don't pick managers that well. Maybe they don't treat their sponsors that well, their F2Es that well. People don't ask them to re-op, something like that. In those cases, for sure. So I think there's definitely like within the community, people know who have really good and thoughtful programs. And I think that the sponsors, like if they're successful, they're going to be singing these people's praises, right? Because they were good partners all along. Like everyone knows who backed, Garnett Station on day one, right? Like everyone knows who backed 3G in the early days. Like everyone knows who backed Kleiner and KKR. These early families have built reputations. And what's cool is it's all kind of under the radar. It's not public information, but people know it in the ecosystem. And if people are treated well and they're supportive and they're there when you need them and they're good communicators, sort of both ways in the partner relationship, because it's limited partner and it's general partner, right? So if the marriage goes well, like that reputation is crucial. And so I think, back to your earlier question, like I think they want really good partners who are going to be along with them the whole ride. And if they do well and you deliver someone a 5X, like, yeah, you kind of want them there for the next deal, to re-up on the next deal. And then eventually when you do launch a fund, ideally they're there with you too. And I think a good independent sponsor or fund program wants to go the whole journey too. Because I think you want someone that's like, look, I'm not just going to do this fund. I'm going to do or this deal. Like I'm going to go with you the whole way. And a lot of times you can't. Like a lot of times the capital is constrained or things change. But like in an ideal scenario, you've got two people that are going to be doing business for 30 years together across deals, across funds, and just creating a nice diaspora of trusted relationships. And that we hear all sorts of people talking about.
Yeah, I just wonder how repeatable the outperformance is in these scenarios where there's a great first outcome. If you look at the great investment firms in the venture business, they keep their returns quite secret, but I don't think it's any secret that Sequoia and Benchmark's returns are really, really, really good, right? So there's something at those firms that, at least for a little while now, they have been able to create real repeatability around outperformance, like real predictable, repeatable outperformance in the form of investment returns, which has led to huge demand to invest behind those names. And there's something about those partnerships that seems to successfully attract the very best technical entrepreneurs who want to start huge businesses in America, huge technical businesses in America. And I'm just curious whether that is where we will find ourselves in this category, but the capital bases will be, as opposed to being like, for-profit institutions, it seems like this category is going to get capitalized more by families as opposed to by anything else. But I'm just curious how repeatable some of these families will be continuing to back one great, F2E after the next.
It's a really interesting question and thought experiment. And I think the reason that those are such good brands in venture is because they're intentionally trying to build great brands, because they know that sourcing is their edge, and they know the best founder is going to want to go to A16Z, right? So they're a business. A16Z is a business that's raising money from investors. What's different is family offices aren't really businesses. And a lot of times, like the owner of the capital is just like, yeah, like I want 3 to 5X's. They're not trying to build a brand. I think a lot of times the employees are, because they're like, we want to have a really good program, so we get this whole like flywheel coming. But that's on top of the sports team they own and the hedge fund program, and like innately, it's not a for-profit entity.
I agree with the differences. Yeah.
So, but it could be like, I think like, back to Pritzker, I think that's one of the reasons they're like, all right, we need to take Pritzker and call it Pritzker Private Capital. And that's an actual brand that is a for-profit entity. And I think you see this dynamic now where family offices are taking their brand name and they're creating commercial enterprises from it. And you've seen Declaration Capital doing that with David Rubenstein. You've seen obviously Pritzker doing it. And I think this is like Rubenstein says this, like, this is where the whole industry is headed. Right? Like Sam Zell's firm has done it. Like they're going from family offices into commercial enterprises, and they're just turning into private equity firms. And I think embedded in that slightly is the nuance that you're describing, is that like you want to build brand and awareness because it's all about sourcing.
In the last 10 to 15 years, there have been a series of GPs that have raised LP capital to become fund investor, to raise a fund in order to invest in search funds. So it's a fund of search fund. I think some of them are doing reasonably well. Do you think that there will be, of course, today, like, the independent sponsor category, the F2E category, seems like they really are just being capitalized in one way or another by family offices. And as you said, it's like a family office and he wants the 3 to 5X. And there's the sports team and the hedge fund program and the long only program. But do you think that you could see a series of funds emerge that are just organized around backing F2Es? Is there,
Oh yeah.
yeah.
Because we already are. There's a handful out there, and if you go down to McGuire Woods, you'll see a bunch of institutional name tags, right? And they're creating either co-invest funds or just slush bucket funds that are doing one-off deals, and maybe they'll do a primary with some co-invest, or you'll just have straight we only do independent sponsor deals with 5 to 7 F2Es or sponsors or whatever, sometimes funded sponsors as well. But there's more and more of that happening, and it's kind of funny because the independent sponsor of the FTE is going direct. So they've unbundled the deal from the fund structure. And then someone comes along and says, well, wait a minute, I could just rebundle that over here into another fund. So we will constantly be rebundling and repackaging businesses into funds. And that's all of finance, right? Like, how can I slap these together and then I'm going to find them better and sell it over here? And then the independent sponsor is like, wait a minute, I purposely broke open the model because it's better like this.
Right, exactly. What are the returns considerations or the fees considerations for those funds, right? If you're an independent sponsor and you want your economics, and part of the reason you became an independent sponsor and left Apollo is for ownership, for autonomy, but also a certain amount of significant economic control and ownership. And then you have a institutional fund of funds that backs independent sponsors like you, and then there's an LP on the back end of that. Are you familiar with those economics, or are they all over the place?
They're going to be all over the place. In some cases, it's they'll just take a rev share on top. In some cases, it's a they'll throw a 1 in 10 on top of a 1 in 10, right? So you're just the end investors paying 2 in 20. It's all, it's slice and dice 1,000 different ways. And I think that the fund of search funds or the fund of independent sponsor deals, they'll have their own way of describing where their blended returns are actually better. And there is something to be said, if someone just has $200 million and is not really dedicated to this space, and they're like, I'm just going to go start doing independent sponsor deals, there is something to be said. All right, this is a dedicated independent sponsor program. They're going to every single conference. They're tracking every one of these upcoming F2Es. They've got notes and CRMs, and they're in the data room, and they're doing an unbelievable job in that space. Who's going to do better net? Is it worth paying that, relatively non-onerous fee layer to a fund of independent sponsor funds? Probably, especially in the early days if you're trying to build a program. I think the sourcing part is interesting, right? Because there's a little bit of an adverse selection thing. Candidly, I think a GP that comes out in the early days is glad to have one of these funds come in for multiple reasons. They will sometimes help with fundraising. They'll sometimes make introductions. They've seen everything. So you sort of have this institutional partner that can be helpful across the board, and a sounding board, and you have this advisory board, and there's just you're kind of in this system and this network. But I think as you graduate out of that, you don't really want that. You just want a straight family office. So there's kind of an adverse selection thing.
What about you, James? I mean, in light of all this knowledge that you have, all these different flavors of the rainbow that are out there in terms of ways to put capital to work in this part of the market, I mean, where do you like to put capital to work? What are you excited about doing? What are some of the deals that you've become really excited about with all of this different activity and funds and family offices, Pritzker going institutional? What is it? What have you decided to do as a result of all this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think a big part of my process is trying to learn where the puck is going and trying to be a part of this ecosystem as much as I can and trying to be as helpful as I can to a lot of these up and coming sponsors, right? And like our program, to be honest, is not the most sophisticated. We're not putting out huge dollars and we're not doing a ton of deals. So it's like, all right, given that, how can I distinguish myself?
We do about one a quarter, right?
Yeah, we do about one a quarter. So because we don't have a big fancy name and we're not writing massive checks, how can I, James, differentiate myself? It's like, well, I can be super helpful, right? And I can really show up and I can be thoughtful and I can make introductions over here. And I can always be a phone call away and a shoulder to cry on and a concert going play, not to get too corny or whatever. But like, I can try like really hard to get out there. And then I can also like meet everyone in the space and like if I like you, like the world's gonna know, right? Like I'm shouting from the rooftops, right? Like there's another side of that. Like if I really don't like you, like maybe no, I'm kidding. Like talking like Michael Owen style. No, I'm very discreet. But I am a champion. I am a champion for these people that come in, and because I love it, it's like totally sincere. Like I'm super excited for them, and like in the great scenarios, I'm the one that's like helping them push them out the door of their firm and getting to be there on day one. And a lot of times I'm not, we don't even get to invest in the deal, but just getting to be along for the journey, like that's super exciting. And we are so heavily relationship based at our firm. So we want to know every deal that someone has done, every investor that was in the deal, what their last jobs were like. Like it's really like we view it as sort of a marriage and a partnership. So you get very close with these sponsors. And I think finding the combination of like the right horse at the right time with the right industry and the right structure. Right. There's these sort of four things and kind of like in what order you look at them. Like, yes, we have our general areas where we will invest and where we won't invest. We're not going to invest in things we don't understand, things with heavy sort of, you know, payer reinsurance risk, all that stuff, like heavy regulated businesses, a lot of deep tech stuff we're not doing. Obviously, we're investing in like simple, easy to understand cash flowing businesses in durable markets. Like that's where we invest. But like beyond that, like it's much more about like the individual and where they are in their career. And again, like you're investing with this highly talented alpha person at the most crucial part of their career who's putting their children's house on the line. Like one could say you don't even have to look at the deal if you feel that good about that.
That's what I was going to ask you about. Like, how much time are you guys spending on the deal or the industry, or is it really just a set of like things that you won't do? And then as long as it's outside of one of those categories, it's not in deep tech or it's not in, whatever, like then what, it's like the horse versus the jockey question, like that's one question. The other question is, if you guys are doing about a deal a quarter, what's the lead time typically on like a deal that you're executing? Like if you guys do a deal here in the first quarter, is that a deal that you've been working on for a year, 3 months, 1 month, 3 years? I'm sure it varies. I'm sure there's but what typically is the lead time that you're finding when you guys actually close a transaction, given the diligence you're doing on the GP?
I mean, 2 months is the shortest, and that's if we already know the GP. Actually, if I'm saying like 2 months before we meet someone and get the deal done, like that's very short. And then I would say like a year, and it really depends how in the sausage we are. Like in some cases, we're helping them design the thesis a little bit, right, and be supportive of it. Kind of watch them kind of percolate and chew on something, and we're giving them feedback on maybe how sellable it is. Maybe you should go talk to this family over here because they might have some ideas, and like maybe we'll be really helpful. Those are really deep, active partnerships that we have with repeat people that we've like kind of followed along, and David Lead Aranova is an example of that. So, I think we're on a sort of 3-year relationship with him, etc. In other cases, like we'll meet someone and it's a very good deal. And like if we're able to reference them extremely well, And if 6 people that we trust very well that we've done deals with know them and they check out, like we can move maybe in 3 months about that time. So that's like the second part of your question. But like it's a long process. You are getting married. You're getting married for 10 years. And there's gonna be ups and downs. And like you want to like take the time to get to know somebody. So I do think a deal is a great way to get to know people.
Do you think it ends up being 10 years? I know it's like these aren't funds. Do you think it ends up being about 10 years but before an independent sponsor is seeking liquidity, or do you think that there's just more duration to these deals?
It could be up to 10 years. Like that's going to be, the kind of outer limit, right? And who knows where anyone is in 10 years. But I think you got to be prepared for that type of timeline. Look, it could be 3 years. But even if it's 3 years, that probably means it's a pretty good outcome. And it probably means you're doing the next deal. So ideally, it's only a 3-year relationship if you had a bad experience, right? Because if it was a good experience, you're probably doing another deal again. And if not, like there's always the question mark, why not? I think we are very heavily focused on underwriting the jockey, the individual, right? Because it's all about that individual. And then in doing that, we're learning about the business and we're doing it with and along them. And then we're doing a huge amount of referencing outside of that sponsor, speaking to the market, bankers, other sponsors in the market, the largest players, whatever paid sort of diligence or consulting studies you need to do, speaking to other families about their thoughts. And one thing that you get to do as an allocator is you get to just call the competitors. You get to call the other funds that are investing in the space. So you guys are investing in this. Like, what do you think? And everyone will talk to you because if you're an investor. But I think it's equally important to be comfortable around the structure, the industry, the company, and the sponsor. Those are like the 4 big things. And you have to really get in deep in all of them. But I always go back to the alignment and the incentive of the individual that you're investing behind. It's just like if you're investing in a startup, like what's the most important thing? Like the actual individual, right?
Feels like it would be we would continue to have a more and more interesting and more colorful lower middle market if we could foment an F2E movement in the next 5 to 10 years that is even half the magnitude of the ETA and search fund movement of the last 10 or 15 years. I've only seen a few of these F2Es, particularly of the ones that are coming out of just super high-powered brands. But hopefully over the next few years, we can see more and more of that talent getting absorbed in the lower middle market and stepping out of the sort of more mega cap, large cap financial services category. That would be my hope.
I think we will. I mean, I think like people are maybe less afraid than they are. Like, if you're mid-career, you're 15 years in, you're just in a different place of life. And I think that like way back when it was like, oh my goodness, like I'm 37 and I'm going to retire when I'm 50. Like I'm halfway through my career. I think people are kind of like, I'm 45 and I'm young. Like I'm just getting going. And like, I'm going to start a bit like, so it's not as like daunting as it once was, but there's still people that are conservative and are going to stay and don't want to take the shot. And look, it's hard. It's a hero's journey. Like there's no way the first 5 years are not like incredibly painful and difficult. Right. And like I've done it and other stuff, like I haven't started a financial service business, but had entrepreneurial ventures. Like it is crazy hard. Like you will cry yourself to sleep at some point. And that's why when you're looking for like partners, like when you're crying yourself to sleep, like, is this person going to be supportive and with you and along the ride and like there, or are they going to be like a huge pain in the ass?
I've learned a ton talking to you about this. Hopefully, everybody who's thinking about the F2E chapter turns off this podcast before your comment about how they're going to cry themselves to sleep.
So I leave it at the very, very end. Yeah, don't do it. But stay where you are.
No, but James, it's great to talk to you about this. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm really enthusiastic for this category within the independent sponsor category to grow and to emerge. I know what you're talking about. You kind of know it when you see these guys, and I hope to see many more of them. With capital partners like you out in the ecosystem, there's certainly something for them to look forward to in terms of great new partners for them to talk to. So I wish you all the best of luck with your work in this category, and maybe we can check in on this topic from time to time. It feels like it might be interesting to cover every so often. So thank you. This has been great.
Thank you, Peter. Anytime. Had a blast, and thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed this episode, check out Axial.com. There, you'll find every episode of this podcast, as well as our recorded Axial member roundtables, some downloadable tools for deal makers, Axial's quarterly league table rankings of top small business acquirers and investment banks, and lots of other useful content that we've created over the course of time. If you're interested in joining Axial as either an acquirer, an owner considering an exit, or as a sell-side M&A advisor, you can get started for free at Axial.com as well. Lastly, if you have ideas for podcast show guests, feel free to reach out to me directly at peter@axial.net. I promise I will respond. Thanks for listening.
Peter Lehrman is the CEO of Axial. All opinions expressed by Peter and podcast guests do not reflect the views or opinions of Axial. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Podcast guests may have ongoing client relationships with Axial.